Rape is the most underreported crime in the world. And what a travesty, because there's so many people who are suffering as a result of this act of violation. I'm Pamela Marshall. This is Sisters of Wellness. Thank you so much for joining us. And I am very, very excited to have as my guest a woman who works in the practice of healing, physical and spiritual healing, Louise Fouche from South Africa, not far from Cape Town. Louise, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, and I'm really looking forward.
Well, you've written a book, and the book that you've written is called Too Close to Remember. You and your family have a place in South Africa. A Family of Gentle Healers is the name of your practice there. But you have a retreat for people to come and experience. Tell them what you get when you go to the retreat.
Yeah, so our retreat, it's a healing retreat. We call it St. Raphael's Healing Retreat. And basically the whole emphasis is about healing, because we just see the world and so many people are just so they come to the healing retreat. It's a 8-day. It's quite intensive. It's living, and just kind of withdraw from the world and spend time really kind of the hiccups and to help people on their healing journey. So people come here for a whole host of different reasons. Sometimes it's a mental dis-ease or a spiritual dis-ease, or things are just not kind of gelling in a certain way in people's lives.
So you have the retreats, and you've seen a number of things that people have challenges with. What made you decide to focus on this woman's story and rape?
So it was just a very interesting, in the book I say, I believe that our paths were meant to cross, because I was sitting with a lot of questions inside myself about kind of my own beliefs and my own faith journey, my own spirituality. And I'm a that are specialized in mental health, and a lot of things that we were facilitating with clients was almost in contradiction with my beliefs and my spiritual journey. And so this journey kind of started to, is it one or the other? Is it both? If it's both, kind of how do we bring it together? And then I met, so the book is the author or my client, it's a pseudonym. So I met kind of Hazel, and a lot of these questions just started being addressed through her journey as I was facilitating her as my client on the healing journey. A lot of questions I had was being addressed. So it became like really a wow, it's this psycho-spiritual idea, which is still very new. Some people have started talking about it, but it's bringing the psychological and the spiritual. And so her life just started unfolding in extraordinary ways. And she herself said she thinks that she's feeling prompted to write the story so that more people can become aware of this journey.
In your work with her, as I mentioned, rape being the most underreported crime, definitely in the United States, and I would imagine in the rest of the world as well. What? So she felt the need to come forth, the desire for her healing process. What at what time period was she raped?
So it's an interesting story, because she was actually sexually abused for quite a number of years, and she had suppressed it. So she was kind of had certain kind of symptoms and signs, but there was no specific recollection about being sexually abused. And as this story of healing starts to unfold, certain things start happening and coming to her. And as occupational therapist, I made use of a lot of creative activities. So drawing and left and right handed dialogue. And it was almost like using the creative means started opening up a lot of the hurt that she had. So it happened when she was young, and it happened over a period of a couple of years. But it was only in her adult life that she actually started realizing something isn't right. And she had almost intense reactions, something that for you and me, we would hardly blink, became almost a hysterical reaction. And she realized something is not right. And so this healing journey started kind of illuminating all of that in the process.
So she was raped when she was a child repeatedly and had suppressed it. What kinds of things were happening that she was able to link the two together? Because for somebody who's watching, who knows? I mean, if they go through these struggles, and was it a family member that raped her?
Yeah, it was a family member. It was, somebody close to her. So she was having dissociations when she would see this person. I don't want to give away who it is because that's part of the journey in the book. But feeling of leaving her body. And so often children and people that are very vulnerable to be able to cope with the intense.
You're freezing some for me. I do hope that the audience is still able to see. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just I'm not quite sure where you missed, but basically, so she was starting to dissociate. It just means it's almost like a feeling of leaving your body, and it's a way, especially for young people or in very traumatic situations, where people try and defend themselves psychologically. So she was having dissociations. She's within her marriage. There was some in the sexual act and in intimacy. She realized her reaction was not normal. She, for instance, also her first marriage was to somebody who eventually came out and said that he's homosexual. And so there was an abnormal sexual relationship already there because it was safe for her. Also, seeing naked pictures of people would kind of have a revulsion for her. And when her son, for instance, just pulled at her panties, she had a very strong reaction, kind of just really lashing out at him. And she just realized this isn't normal. Something is going on, and she wasn't quite sure what it was.
There are those who carry that with them every day because it happened with somebody that they knew, a parent, a grandparent, a cousin, an uncle, those people that you would look to protect you. How did you bring her? And I know that her name has been changed, but you use the name Hazel in the book.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Louise from South Africa is the author of a book, Too Close to Remember. And it is a story of how one of Louise's clients went through this process of recognizing that something happened to her in her life, and which is really amazing. And you're like, how many more people? I was actually talking to somebody who said, I don't know, I might have been raped. And I'm just now thinking about it as you say it to me. And the person said it in jest because it had something to do with a family member. And I haven't said anything else about it. But if that comment came, then there's a good chance that it did happen.
Yeah. So with a psycho-spiritual approach, which is what we make use of in my therapy space with my clients, but also at the retreat, there's really this concept of our souls know. Our souls are much wiser than actually our minds, and even our bodies are much wiser than we think, and it holds information and wisdom. And it's how do we tap into that? Because a lot of times our mind will say, but I don't remember who it was, so it couldn't have happened. And so we kind of just push it out and pretend, but there's so many things happening inside of us that is giving us clues about something serious that has happened to us. So it's about trying to access that wisdom in the psychospiritual approach in therapy, that we really kind of go deep and kind of what is our soul's, what does it know? And it just opens up an extraordinary world out. The more you kind of go in, the wisdom is just incredible. And so that was the point where Hazel started realizing and started trusting this wisdom of her soul that led her on the journey. And I think that's the other thing in the story that's so amazing. And that isn't just for Hazel, it's for all of us. But we actually know how to heal, but we've stopped listening to ourselves. We've stopped tapping into that really deep spiritual part of ourselves and being connected to God and the Holy Spirit. And so often what happens is that we kind of say it can't be, because logically it doesn't make sense. And so we push it out. But if we start to kind of relax into that and be open to God prompting us and guiding us, then amazing things start happening. So maybe something else I can just point out that was just really quite something in Hazel's healing story was just kind of this intuitiveness. I need to go and speak to this pastor. And then she would see him. All of a sudden, synchronicity would happen. I tell him.
Okay.
Kind of part of her story.
Louise?
Sorry,
Louise?
breathe.
Yeah, you froze again. Go back, and synchronicity would start to happen, because I want people to hear what you're saying.
All right, so synchronicity would happen. So she would bump into this pastor whose face and kind of her name came up during her meditation and prayer time. And she would then bump into him. And then she would go, all right, I'd like to come and speak to you. And still there's this, I'm not sure what I'm going to say, but she would go and she would chat to him. And then he would bring a very valuable bit of information in her healing process. And so it's just really, I almost want to say it's a different world that opens up when we start kind of really connecting to God and allowing him and our soul to show us how to heal on our journey.
That is powerful. Because we live in a world where we're so bombarded with exterior noise that people feel like they don't even have time to sit still long enough to hear. And there's so much chatter going on in their heads that they feel like they don't know how to turn it off, to even sit quietly. What do you suggest? We're talking about somebody who was raped that didn't know they were raped. There are people who are hurting who do know that they were raped, yet still don't know how to manage those emotions and be able to let go and move forward.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. In the book also, we've got some techniques that we describe for people that they can try. So we've got a hand on the heart technique. And it's also important for people to have a spiritual practice. So whatever that might be for you, whatever is comfortable. So it might be centering prayer, it might be meditation or some form of contemplation. It might be prayer and different types of prayer. Sometimes rote prayer helps for some people. Other people don't want that at all. So the more people kind of become in touch with the spiritual side and really in touch with God, the more kind of the easier it becomes to literally hear the Holy Spirit. So in Hazel's story, God spoke to her in songs, and she would wake up with a song in her head, and she would know that God is trying to tell her something, and she would listen to the words of the song. And there's some really powerful moments in this journey where the words almost start changing as she's allowing the message of God to come to her, to kind of really understand what is the next step to take in her in the healing. where does she need to go? What does she need to focus on?
So in your work as a practitioner, you're talking about bringing in the spiritual part.
Yeah.
How did you move to that place to start incorporating that in your practice?
So I was just really struck. I'm not sure if it's the same in America as in South Africa, but I was very struck with what we call revolving door syndrome. So a lot of my clients, kind of almost on a yearly basis, would be admitted to our private mental health facilities, and kind of there was no healing happening. It was kind of they would be admitted with depression or anxiety, and pills would be given, and then they'd kind of be discharged. And next year we'd see them again and see them again. And I was often struck. I think something that really stood out for me right in the beginning when I started asking questions was when I could see so strongly that there was something like forgiveness that I thought had a big impact, or unforgiveness in people's mental dis-ease, in depression. So there's a concept of people that are depressed tend to focus more on the past and what happened in the past, and struggle to let it go. And a lot of these diseases, I've kind of started seeing a link to unforgiveness. But in our mental health system, we're not really allowed to talk about spirituality or forgiveness or anything like that. It's kind of out of our scope of practice. And so with the questions that we asked, we were trying to say, well, where can this be incorporated? Because it's such an important part in people's healing. I like that example where they say unforgiveness is like drinking poison and thinking the other person is going to die. But our unforgiveness, it becomes so toxic for us. And that often keeps us in a place of illness.
Yeah, there are actual studies on looking at what unforgiveness does to our cells and how it contributes to other diseases, as you mentioned, mental illness, but other physical ailments, and on the whole list, and how people's lives and their quality of life improves once they forgive. And to say to her about forgiving the rapist, how do you, because, you know, is there any greater violation than to kill me, than to rape me?
Yeah, so it's a very people have to be ready. And I think that's really important. And I know initially the first reaction is, what? Me forgive that person? No ways. You know, he's taken so much of me. He's violated me. My life will never be normal. And so people need to be at a space where they feel that they become ready. So we also have a saying that says you can't heal what you can't feel. And so an important part of forgiveness is actually to go and to experience that anger, because there was an injustice done. And if we just flippantly go over it and we forgive too fast, people actually don't have, I almost want to say, a depth in their forgiveness. It becomes kind of a add-on, a plaster. And so there's a lot of resentment that is seething underneath, and they say they're forgiven, but it pops out in a whole lot of different ways. So we really kind of first spend time allowing people to really feel the feelings, the sadness, the grief, the loss, the anger, and then we start facilitating a process towards forgiveness. And it is a process, and it's got different steps that we take people through to eventually come to a point. And sometimes it takes weeks, and sometimes it takes months for people to go through that process.
Louise Fouche, she is the author of a book, Too Close to Remember, the journey of one of her clients who was suppressing the memory of a rape or repeated rapes that took place in her childhood. Louise is in South Africa, and she and her family have a center called the Family of Gentle Healers. They're about an hour from Cape Town, hour and a half from Cape Town.
Yeah, hour and a half.
So, of course, during COVID, you all have not had your retreats. And so, with people that come there, Do you focus on any specific thing? I know this is somebody that you worked with in overcoming rape. Are there when you advertise this retreat, are there specific things that you tell people that they can come and be healed from or work toward the healing process?
Yeah, so we leave it very open. Anybody who feels that they are in need of healing. So people who have gone through miscarriages or other traumas, people who, so violence is quite big in South Africa. So sometimes we have people that have been exposed to some form of violence, and they're really struggling to make sense of their life again. So sometimes it's anxiety and depression, so it's a mental dis-ease, and they're just not breaking kind of or finding that they are being cured. So there's a whole host of them. So our focus is on healing, and we very much believe that people who feel called to us will reach out to us. So it really is when you feel there's a sense of I'm missing something, I'm needing something, there's more to life than what I'm leading. And so then we have those people. So there's other people also who are unhappy in their jobs, and they're just feeling that something is not, they're not kind of living their full life purpose, or not fully alive, if I can even put it in those terms.
So you've written this book, and thank you to all of you who are watching. We're talking about Louise's work in helping a rapist, so not a rapist, but the person. That would be a good retreat. People who've been convicted, because what's going on in your mind that you feel like the best thing to do today is go rape somebody? I would be interested in hearing that. Maybe that's your next assignment. We can.
So I can tell you in the book, Pamela, something that's just, it almost blows your mind. You almost can't believe that it happened, is that while Hazel was on this healing journey, her son, who was 3 years old, was expelled from preschool because he had been accused of sexually inappropriate behavior. And so all of a sudden, it's these two parts. She's struggling with her own healing journey, and now her son is going through this incredible, intense experiences. The people at the preschool is kind of pushing them out, and just that part of that journey. So, as I said, as her journey unfolds, it almost becomes, you almost can't believe the extraordinary things that happens in her journey, and how remarkable she finds the strength to kind of reach out to him, and how she makes peace with so many elements, and just realize at the end of the day, they found out that he was a sexual abuse a victim as well. And so it becomes so complex, because is he now a perpetrator? Is he a victim? How do you put this all together? And how the intense shame of, gosh, who do I go to ask for help? When I know what is the pain of having that happen to me, and now I've got to know that my son has done this to somebody else, and he's 3 years old. I mean, there's no intention. It doesn't come from a bad place. And how complex our world is, and how broken.
Yeah. Did she feel responsible for that in some kind of way?
I think it wasn't so much responsible. It was kind of and again, kind of in her spiritual practice and her awareness, she realized this is most probably a generational kind of lineage pain that is just being passed from one person to the next.
Yeah.
And just kind of realizing that if I don't stop, and we both, her son and her, don't really get help, that this will be perpetuated again in the future. And so she goes to takes him to play therapy, and reaches out to people to try and get the best help for him, and how their relationship is affected, and relationship with other people. And so a very not an easy read. I must tell people that this book
Yeah.
is not an easy read, but are so many elements of hope in this story, that it is just incredible. And this feeling of, she's not the only one. That hope and that guidance, that love, that God kind of enfolded her with her journey is available for all of us. She's not an exception.
But people do tend to carry that with shame and blame sometimes, depending. And so, how do you work with people to get? Because once people get past the shame, probably more people would talk about it.
Yeah.
And we talk about it. We always think about rape from a man raping a woman. There are men and boys who have been raped as well. And I think if, considering the fact that we know women don't talk about it enough, men certainly don't.
No.
So what do you say to people to help shift that shame and guilt that they were the victim of somebody else violating them?
So there's a couple of things, Pamela. So first of all, the shame is really an innate belief that it was you are wrong, you are bad, you are dirty. It kind of gets to really the core of a person. So guilt is often, it has to do, I did something bad. And it's actually easier to deal with guilt because it's outside yourself. And it's forgiving yourself. But shame means it's me. There's something bad wrong with me. And so we actually encourage people to just start talking about it. Because when you start talking about it, you almost hear the illogicalness. I mean, how can it be your fault as a 5-year-old child or as an 18-year-old woman or whatever that somebody either raped you or abused you? I mean, there's no logical sense in that. But that's the story people tell themselves. And by encouraging them to share their story, it becomes more obvious that this doesn't make any sense. And often when so we encourage them to share with somebody they feel safe with, comfortable with, in our healing retreats within the safe, open environment, kind of really holding people. And so then when they actually start talking about it, the shame starts dropping. So shame is kept in place by silence.
And what an insidious tool used by the Prince of Darkness.
Yeah.
So you have been violated, then you're convinced that you need to be quiet. And I want people to understand this and hear this. You're tearing up the cells in your body with your silence and your guilt that you are imposing on your own self. And starting with this process of, you said, just starting to talk about it and then heading toward that space of forgiveness, forgiving themselves first.
Absolutely. And sometimes I find the process of self-forgiveness is harder for people than actually forgiving perpetrators or people that have done something to them, because it's kind of, you feel, I should have known better, I should have asked help, I should have. And so it's really hard for them to get to a place of, you were 5 years old, or you were 18, or you were so petrified that you really believed something was going to happen. And so it's kind of getting them to that place of, gosh, and it's also this, we often say, you can't judge yourself with your wisdom you have now. Now you've grown and you've gained a lot of wisdom. You can't judge yourself now for how you were when you were younger, because a lot of things you didn't know. You didn't have the experience. You didn't have kind of your healing journey or whatever has already brought you to a place further than where you were then. And to give yourself the acknowledgement and to forgive yourself.
Louise Fouche, she is the author of the book Too Close to Remember. She is in South Africa joining us tonight. What time is it there?
1:30 in the morning.
We're keeping you up late. I really, really, really appreciate you sharing this story and the information on how people can find the book and find out more about your retreats that you have, Family of Gentle Healers. But this conversation, as Erlene Henning posted here, so much needed talking about. Thanks for bringing this forward. So many, both men and women, are suffering in silence. Erlene, I thank you for watching and sharing. Um, Royal Colbert, Dr. Royal Colbert, she was indeed a strong woman. I in the little time that we have left, we're at our mark, but speak to people about how they are impeding the work that they were here to do by allowing that act of one person to bring them to a place of silence, how it impedes their relationships, how it impedes their flow of gifts and their callings, how it impedes their spiritual journey.
Mm. Yes, I think it's quite complex, because by silencing somebody, you almost have them, like I said, the biggest thing is that they feel shame, and so they feel so ashamed they can't believe they've got something to offer. And we've all been called to serve in one way or another, and it's important to realize that however we've been called to serve is never about us. It's about giving back to people, communities. That's why we've been given our talents. But when you feel so ashamed, you're holding back. And it's important to remember we all gain by you serving with your talents. And when you hold back, we all lose. And so we're missing pieces of this puzzle to kind of uplift our broken world, as people are holding on to their pieces and believing it's not valuable enough. So it's also urging from me to really recognize and understand that we really need you, for all of us, for the world to become healed.
The story of a woman who was suppressing rape as a child is the story in the book, Too Close to Remember. If you're interested in getting a copy or learning more, the web address is at the bottom of the screen. If you are suffering, what do you say to people who may be watching or listening to the podcast if they are suffering for whatever reason, previous hurts and pains? What do you say to those people in our closing moments, Louise?
I think is to go deeper inside yourself, to connect to
Wait, how do
God.
you go deeper? How do you go deeper? People who don't know that. We know how to go to church, and we know about building fun, and we know about, all of the stuff that goes on in under the umbrella of faith-based communities, but there's not enough emphasis on spirituality. So there are people who don't even know that. They don't
So
even know
it's
what
about,
that means to
yeah.
get there.
Yeah, so I think it's also about a close relationship with God. It's not just about how we worship, but it's about really having and having an intimate relationship. As Hazel, hear the songs, that the messages, that it becomes almost a talking, a dialogue, and through that, people will find their path to healing. And each person's path is different, but once you start having that relationship with God, and you kind of your spirituality grows in a certain sense, amazing things start happening.
I can testify to that. I was raped in college, and do talk about that in the book that I've written, Peace and Healing Through Forgiveness. And so I hope that your story with Hazel and other stories will encourage people to recognize that that's a bump in the road, and it's a huge bump. It's a huge hurdle, but you can overcome it. You can release all of the emotions that are associated with it, whether it's shame or guilt or the resentment and anger toward the other person, that can be released so that we can move forward in what God has called us to on this side of glory. Louise, thank you for joining us tonight to talk about this very important topic.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And it was great. It was lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Louise. I hope to get to South Africa and come to one of your retreats.
I look forward to seeing you. It'll be
Louise,
great.
thank you. Louise Fouche, who is the author of the book Too Close to Remember and a part of Family of Gentle Healers. And they hope to get their retreats started back after the first of next year. Prayerfully, we will be able to do that. In the meantime, everybody please be safe, stay healthy, eat well, drink lots of water, spend some quiet time. Just be quiet and hear from the one that sent you here to begin with. Peace takes practice, and healing is a process that does take practice as well. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments. And we look forward to seeing you on Thursday for the Timbuktu Report. In the meantime, I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing at the well. Make it a great moment. We'll see you next time.